DS Waterways and Environment, Mr. Wycliffe, DS Fisheries and Forestry, Mr. Pene Kunimbuli, the WWF Pacific Regional Director, Dr. Mark Drew, Director Environment, Ms. Singh, members from other government ministries, NGOs, academic institutions, private sector, and the community. Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, the World Oceans Day is commemorated each year on June 8th and provides the platform to raise awareness of vital importance of our oceans and the role they play in human lives. Fiji is delighted to join with our national and global community to celebrate this day marked with the theme, the ocean, life and livelihoods. The ocean presents a great diversity and wealth of environmental resources that in itself is a natural asset for food security, livelihoods, recreation, and economic value for a country as a whole. It is made up of an assemblage of habitats including mangroves, seagrass, seamounts, underwater hydrothermal vents, coral reef systems that are home to many marine species. The prime focus of this year's theme centers on the ocean as a life source supporting humanity's sustenance and that of every other organism on Earth. The ocean covers approximately 70% of the planet and produces 50% of the planet's oxygen. It is home to most of the Earth's biodiversity, and it is main source of protein for more than 1 billion people around the world. As per the United Nations, to date, 90% of large fish populations have been depleted and 50% of coral reefs are destroyed. We're taking more from the oceans than what can be replenished. To protect and preserve the ocean and all it sustains, it is imperative that we must create a new balance rooted in true understanding of the ocean and how humans relate to it. The theme for World Ocean Day this year highlights the need for concrete action to manage our ocean to sustain livelihood, meaning the preservation of our ocean biodiversity. It comes with the hope that any action to protect the ocean and marine species, no matter how small it may be, can contribute to a bigger movement that frontiers the scaling up of global efforts towards sustainable ocean management. Here in Fiji today, we will witness one such tangible action as part of the launch of the WWF Dreketi River and Estuary Shark and Ray Survey. The findings from this study is significant as it achieves one of the priority targets under the Ministry of Environment's National Biodiversity Strategic Plan for 2020-25 that centers around the protection of critical, endangered and vulnerable marine species in Fiji. The study is the first fisheries independent survey on sharks and rays in its occurrence on the island of Vanuatu. Of the shark and ray species that have been documented in the study area, 3 species are listed in the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species as critically endangered. That includes the scallop hammerhead shark, the great hammerhead shark and bottlenose wedgefish. The 2 species that are near threatened include the bull shark and blacktip shark, and the 2 ray species that are vulnerable includes the ocellated eagle ray and the pink whip ray. The study found that several shark species use estuaries as nursery areas. Shark nurseries are critical areas where gravid females give birth and where early life residency for sharks and rays occurs. This study provides an insight in the understanding sharks and rays ecology and improving current management approaches within the Dreketi River. The study also recognizes that there are some anthropogenic pressures that threaten the protection of the estuaries as the breeding grounds for sharks and rays. In particular, pressures that are attributed to fishing, an increase in coastal development, declining water quality, and habitat loss owing to their close proximity to human populations. The Dreketi shark survey is particularly important given the sharp decline in numerous shark populations around the world, which has been due to a lack of protection for creating breeding habitats and overfishing. The Dreketi shark survey emphasizes the importance of Fiji's river systems in sustaining shark populations as a breeding ground and the links between the health of the land, the river, and the ocean. The Dreketi River drains into Fiji's second Ramsar site, Golingoli-Dakobata, which is of national and global importance for biodiversity. At the national level, the Ministry of Environment is the legislative authority under the Environmental Management Act 2005, is mandated to ensure the protection of Fiji's rich ocean biodiversity and ensure sustainable development of our ocean resources and control of land-based development and pollution that impacts our ocean. The Ministry enforces the Endangered and Protected Species Act 2002 that regulates the international and domestic trade in some of the most iconic marine species that exist in our waters. Schedules 1 of the EPS Act 2017 enlists a total of 12 sharks and sawfish for protection as indigenous species believed to be threatened with extinction. The trade in Schedule 1 species is regulated and prohibited because of its special unique features that make it more vulnerable, and some of which are believed to be threatened with extinction. The EPS Act 2002 also regulates CITES protected species that includes some species of the sharks, whales, dolphins, manta rays, turtles, and marine species. The Marine has its National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan 2020-25 that recognizes the important value of ocean biodiversity in supporting a vibrant marine ecosystem that supports livelihood and economic growth. Fiji, through the NBSF, also recognizes the importance of meeting our global and national targets on marine protected areas. Fiji has so far identified 20 special unique marine areas for protection, which the Ministry is already working towards protecting. The Ministry is also facilitating the work on achieving Fiji's 30% MPA commitment under the CBD. The Ministry of Environment's Coral Reef Policy, which was launched in May 2020, guides strategic priorities and interventions at global and national levels on coral reefs management. Fiji, through the Ministry of Environment, has declared the Great Sea Reef, locally known as the Kolevu, on Golingoli-Dakobata, Madhwata, as a Ramsar site of international importance. It is the third largest reef system in the southern hemisphere and has rich marine biodiversity. The environmental impact assessment and waste and pollution permit system in place, the Ministry continues to ensure the protection of critically endangered species and the pollution of our ocean resources. This permitting system sets standards and timelines for compliance so that emissions, discharge, and disposals are within the environmentally acceptable limits, thereby increasing efforts in preventing solid waste ending up in our waterways and oceans. The Ministry also works very closely with the Ministry of Economy's Oceans and Climate Change team and aligns its work with the National Oceans Policy. We hope to continue to work with other line ministries in this space. The Ministry acknowledges the author of this survey, Mr. Andrew Paris, and commends WWF Pacific for an interesting study on sharks and ray population. The report will guide our decision-making process under the various legislative frameworks and in meeting our targets under the NBSEP 2020-2025 and the CBD. I wish to acknowledge our team at the Ministry of Environment for this great partnership we have with WWF Pacific. I would like to encourage more collaboration on similar research and scientific assessments. We hope to work with other scientists nationally and globally to ensure that our oceans, which is our source of livelihood, and our identity as island people, is protected. In launching this report, I wish to say that this work is of very high quality and very impressive in terms of the methodology. I commend this report to also students and researchers who wish to get in hand on undertaking studies based on scientific methodology. If you peruse through this report, you will note the detailed methodology that is presented, which becomes a benchmark for students, researchers who would want to undertake similar studies. So while commending this report, I want to, in particular, thank the authors of this report, the researchers who undertake solid research based on scientific methodology to arrive at the conclusion. Before I do the soft launch, I want to, in particular, tease out 4 findings from this study that kind of stood out. The first one, and I quote, an assessment of the biological cache data showed a high proportion of recently born sharks, which is indicative of the partition along the neonate and young of the year residency, healed and absent umbilical scar condition in the estuary and river. Number 2, the presence of an extensive mangrove system at the estuary and lower reaches of the Dreketi River provides an ideal habitat for the elasmobranch branch. Mangrove forests are areas of high ecological utility and are characterized by having high primary and secondary productivity, as well as the presence of a large number of microhabitats which play a major role in the life stages of many tropical elasmobranchs. Number 3, there is a plethora of threats that the Dreketi River and Estuary faces, and these pressures are expected to increase in intensity and duration. Pollution and destructive fishing practices such as overnight gill netting are 2 of the main threats identified, coupled with bad land use management and extractive industries in the Dreketi catchment increases sediment load and runoff, which will drastically alter the health of the lower reaches of the river. Any impact on the physical condition of the river and estuary will inadvertently lessen the carrying capacity and decrease the diversity and abundance of species which are suited to the conditions here. And lastly, more research, and this is a standard research document where, following one research, based on the findings, the authors then list down what further research needs to be done. So I want to point out this, and I want to thank the authors for providing new areas of research. And they state, more research on the abundance, diversity and fine-scale distribution and population structure is required to clearly understand the utilization of the Dreketi River and Estuary by elasmobranch for parturition and postnatal residency. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very impressed with the quality of the report. If you also look at the references, and they have done a thorough archival research, and I note that a lot of researches that they've examined, these are recent frontier research. So the research findings, the methodologies have been based on the studies that have been recently done. So the authors who have done this research, they have been on the frontier, they've acquired frontier knowledge on this area before they embarked on this particular study. So I want to acknowledge the quality of research, the quality of researchers who undertook this work. And it's my pleasure now to launch this report, and I also wish to do a soft launch, so those who are there out in the community, also in the country outside, can access this report from our homepage. So it's my pleasure to formally launch this and commend this report to you all for your perusal, for your examination, and to utilize in the work that you do, and for us policymakers as well. And let me now do a soft launch.